I'm a very big believer that cramping is related to electrolytes. I know that the research on that is a little bit mixed, but I know from experience that it is. So that sodium potassium ratio is important for both muscle contraction, but also for replenishment.
Hey, what's up, everyone, and welcome to the Best You podcast. My name is Nick Carrier, body optimization coach and creator of the 10-Week Transformation. The mission of the show is to help you get closer to the best version of yourself so you can live a life of more meaning and impact. In today's episode, we have Jess Cerra. Jess was a professional cyclist for 12 years, making her an expert in endurance, training, and nutrition. And now she's the vice president of product and community development at Alete Active Nutrition, and where she brings her science knowledge and flavor to the endurance nutrition world. During this episode, we're going to dive into fueling strategies for endurance athletes, what to eat before and during race day, how to push through physical and mental barriers, how to train for endurance races, and how Jess actually applies nutrition science to real everyday life. For now, it's time to get closer to your best you. Let's dive in. What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Best You podcast. Today, I am super excited to be joined by the one and only Jess Cerra. Jess is a biker, a long-distance biker, endurance athlete, and she's also an expert in nutrition. So I'm super excited to dive today into kind of like performance nutrition, performance training when it comes to long-distance type stuff, electrolyte replacement, and probably a little bit of your story as well here and there. But I'm just super excited to dive into these topics because I know that's something that a lot of people are interested about learning a little bit more. I'm kind of ask a high level, relatively broad question, but it's going to start with kind of like performance nutrition today, since you have since you're well versed in this. What do you think is maybe like the biggest myth that people believe when it comes to maybe nutrition as a whole, or maybe specifically like sports nutrition? What do a lot of people think they need to be doing that maybe isn't really the full truth?
I think that carb loading is the first thing that comes to mind. There's, like, we're starting to get more sophisticated with carbs because they're very trendy right now, and hopefully that becomes less of a trend. But I also think that that elite athletes are, special in some way where they're doing something different than the everyday athlete or the weekend warrior, or just, we're all sort of built the same way. So I think there's a little bit of myth around that.
Meaning that a lot of people think that some elite athletes are need to be doing crazy other things different than the normal human being, but that's not actually the truth.
Yeah, or that it's not accessible, because nutrition is actually, it can be very simple.
Yeah, totally. Well, let's stay on the carb loading thing, because there's gonna be a number of people who are listening to the podcast who maybe run half marathons or full marathons or dabble in like half Ironmans or full Ironmans, and definitely, especially if you're doing it for the first time or the second time or maybe even the third time, people are very unsure around, okay, what really is the best way to attack this? And obviously a lot of people have for years think carb loading, let's have a big thing of pasta the night before. Tell us why maybe carb loading isn't the exact thing that that maybe people think it is, or it's not all it's maybe cut out to be.
Well, I think if you've ever tried it and you think about it, if you eat a huge meal like that the night before, it probably doesn't feel that good. Like, you may not sleep as well, and you might just feel a little off in the morning. So the idea of eating a lot of carbs is great. You just don't have to do it all at once, because your body can really only absorb and store, so much at a time. And it's better if you're practicing, just if you're training for something like a half marathon or any sort of endurance event, the best practice is incorporating carbs into your nutrition plan daily and your training plan. And then making sure that during the week that you're tapering or taking it easy going into that event, you don't do the thing where you think, well, I'm not training as much, so I need less. And you keep that percentage of your diet very high in carbs. So every day you're getting, at least 75 to 80% carbs in your diet. And that can start off with like really more high nutrient carbs early on in the week, where you're still getting fiber and, brown rice and lentils and other things. And then you can kind of taper that off into more of like your beige diet, your white rice, your white pasta that are less energy consuming on the gut as you get closer to your event. And this doesn't even have to apply for if you're signed up for a race. It could just be like you're going to do a really hard hike with your friends on the weekend and you just want to feel good, right? Yeah. Really for anything.
Totally. So just to kind of reiterate some of the things that you said there. So are you saying that when you're training for a race, sometimes about 75 to 80% of your calories are from carbohydrates?
Yeah, it's very high.
Gotcha.
And that includes fruits and vegetables,
right?
Of course. But like my plate is, it's a lot of carbohydrates.
Totally. Is that something that you do always when you're doing long distance, like biking, or you would recommend somebody if they're doing long distance running, or is that something that you like to practice kind of all the time, or like when do you usually do about 75 to 80% carbs versus not, or do you not ever not do that?
So this is a really fascinating question to me because I'm retired from professional racing now and I work full time. So my schedule has changed a lot. My husband is still a full-time cyclist. And so being around him can be a little challenging because it's like he should just be hooked up to a feeding tube. And so it's like I see him eat and I want to eat. And I've explored different things now that sometimes my day looks like I just go to the gym and I lift really hard and really efficiently. And my body just functions better when I'm eating a lot of carbs. When I try to shift to more protein, and I think I get enough protein. I'm 43, so I'm very conscious of protein and creatine and other things, mostly for recovery, preventing myself from getting too sore, sleeping. But I am aware of those things, but I just don't feel as well when I'm not eating a diet rich in carbohydrates. And I base a lot of things on how I feel. It's something I've learned throughout my career. I've never had a body type that is ridiculously lean where you're like seeing all of my muscles pop out everywhere. But from an engine standpoint, like I'm an endurance freak and that's what I was made to do. And so when I don't fuel that freak, I am not a happy person. And I would say that I do more endurance than the average person also. But it's a preference for me. And I'm also not big on putting myself into a box as far as a diet goes. I find that incredibly stressful. Like I am often thinking like, what can I add to my life to make myself healthier? Moving more fruits and vegetables versus like, what do I need to take away? That is not a school of thought that resonates with me. I just don't think that's it's not healthy for me.
Yeah, totally. So I'm going to get a little bit of glimpse into your kind of training and your nutrition. So when you say you do more endurance than the average human being, to give everybody a sense of what it does your training regimen usually look like on a kind of weekly basis in terms of your endurance work.
If I can squeeze it in the summer when the daylight hours here in Montana are insane, it could be anywhere from riding 200, 300 miles a week and running 40 to 50 miles.
Wow.
Both of those things together.
Yeah, totally. All right. Wow. That's a lot.
And I'm not afraid to get up in the dark and use a headlamp, which I did today. So yeah, it's a lot. But I think that's part of the reason why I like shift to that, mindset of eating.
Totally. So give us give me an example day of when you would both bike some and run some, and then maybe how you weave in your nutrition kind of before, after, and around these training sessions. So give everybody a little bit of a glimpse of like, okay, if I was to do something like this and train twice a day, bike and run, how would I kind of space out my nutrition, and what are maybe some of the specific components of the meals, of the feedings, if you will, that I'm most focused on hitting?
So I'll use today as an example
Okay.
because it's exactly what I'll be doing today. And I think one thing I want to note for someone that's like, girl, I don't have that kind of time to train and like eat all day long. When I am doing less, the only thing that I modify is basically the amount. I don't really change like the ratio of what I'm eating. It's just, and I'm like naturally less hungry when
Right.
I'm doing less because I've kind of allowed my body to guide me. Like I've learned through getting older and maturity to not again put myself in that box. And so my body knows and it works really well like that. So
Yeah.
today, my friend Julia and I, we hiked the mountain this morning. There's a route that goes straight up and straight down. It's 4 miles. You gain 2,000 feet. So we did that at 6:30. We were back down here getting ready for work at 8. So before I went up there, I actually had the Trader Joe's mochi cake.
Okay.
We made that this week. So I just had a piece of that, like super quick energy. And then when I got back from that, I had eggs and toast and fruit. And so that was my real breakfast with coffee.
Okay. Okay.
And then I will probably snack on fruit or cheese and crackers and hummus a little bit today. We have leftover pasta from last night. I'll eat that for lunch. And then this evening after work, I'll meet some girlfriends to ride up on the mountain again, which will be about maybe 2 hours round trip. We'll probably ride into sunset. So I'll hit dark on both ends of the day.
Yeah.
And I'll eat some of our products on that. I'll eat the energy gummies that Salt Stick makes. And probably have some drink mix in my bottle and stay hydrated. And then when I get home again, I think we're going to have steak and potatoes and veggies for dinner. So
Nice.
it's nothing outlandish. It's just, like I said, a lot of those good things. And then
Totally.
I almost always have something for dessert. And this is really interesting, but I love just whipping like a little bit of cream with maple syrup and salt, like a little tiny ramekin,
Huh.
and having that for dessert. It's my favorite dessert.
That actually sounds amazing. That sounds amazing. That sweet and salty combination is always so good. So that's awesome. That's awesome. To go back to a couple of the more specific nuance things that you talked about in terms of, especially when you're getting closer to your race, like if you're maybe talking about the week leading into a race, if the race is Saturday, the whole week leading into that race, let's say you talked about in the beginning of the week, just kind of doing your normal thing, having more of continue to have the high nutrient carbs in the beginning of the week, like you said, like the veggies and the higher fiber type carbohydrates. And then as you get closer to the race, you maybe have more easily digestible type carbohydrates. Talk to us a little bit about why that transition to more easily digestible carbohydrates leading into the actual race.
Yeah, and so this is a lot of practicing what works for you and like what type of activity you're doing. So like with running, it's obvious, like GI issues during running, it's a game changer. With
Yep.
cycling, sometimes you can navigate your way around a bad stomach day. But if you're in a stage race, which is multiple days long, which is a lot of what I did, once you get off track, it's really hard to get back on track.
Yeah.
And then with triathlon, that's just, a really different discipline. Again, being able to fuel yourself, learning how to fuel yourself to then get off the bike and run seems to be kind of that like turning point in most people's races. So what I've learned over time, is like what I shared. Most cyclists will tell you after a stage race, all they want to eat is a salad because your body's kind of like, give me that good stuff.
Mm,
Um, but what happens when you're eating too much fiber or too much of that roughage is the obvious GI issues where you're maybe like too regular or something is off. And anyone knows that's super hard to fix during a block of a race or like in a race. So
yeah.
you don't want to get yourself there. The other thing is the amount of water that your body will pull into your gut to digest and absorb
Mm,
those foods. It does take more energy. So that insoluble fiber There's a reason why it's called insoluble fiber. It's
Yeah.
because your body has to use energy to basically process it so you can then excrete it. So avoiding those types of things and kind of knowing what those trigger foods might be for you.
Yeah.
Like I know what mine are, and then I know the things that maybe I can stomach more of. Protein is another thing. Protein is a macronutrient that is digested in your stomach. And so you'll pull water naturally into your stomach, unlike carbs and fat, where it's processed in your intestines. So something to be aware of if you've ever like tried to eat a sandwich in the middle of a long ride and it doesn't go well.
Yeah. So you usually don't. So what does so if you're trying to not have crazy amounts of protein leading into a race, does that mean when you're having dinner the night before, you don't have any protein source or just a little bit of a protein source, and then like the morning of, what does that look like in terms of protein consumption, like kind of the day before slash day of race day?
Yeah, the night before I'm selective. Like I find protein like poultry is easier to,
Mm,
it's a quicker
less
cycle of
fat.
digestion. I probably won't have a steak the night before, like a really hard, intense race. I might do that like a couple days out just to like get the iron and the other nutrients that I like to get from red meat. But the night before, normally, a general amount, like 20%, what's left in that, after 80%. And then the morning of, very low on protein for me because I know that I cannot eat eggs before I do an event. Maybe I could do like some peanut butter, is a protein that I can handle in the morning. So
Yeah, just takes practice. So you want to try out the things during your training period so that you don't just do something brand new or something different on race day because you're setting yourself up for failure, I'm sure.
yeah, and that's anyone can tell you story about trying that.
Yeah, totally, totally. Um, okay, so to maybe transition a little bit into like the training side of things when it comes to endurance race, talk to me about what kind of progression looks like over the course of a ramp up to a race in terms of how much total mileage you do from a week to week basis. Now, um, I'm relatively familiar with running training because I've done a couple of half marathons. I've trained for a marathon and then stress fracture of my hip when I actually attempted it. So did not finish it, but so I'm relatively familiar with running, not with cycling. But talk to me about what the progression looks like from a week to week basis in terms of overall mileage.
Okay. So I bet it's somewhat similar to running where there's like you do the periodization of your training. So you want to break. So if you were to look at your calendar as a whole, you're going to sit with your coach and you're going to break it into certain blocks. And generally, what those look like after you have your off season or your rest. And so the way cycling works is the winter would be considered like an off season and a building season. And then the main bulk of the season, depending on where you're racing, is going to be anywhere from like January, February through September, October. So it's really long.
Okay.
So starting with you come off your rest and you're in the fall and winter period, that is going to be all about endurance, mileage, building your base. And so there's not going to be a lot of hard things in there. In fact, that's where you really want to limit that burnout, where you're
Yeah.
just getting miles. And I've done up to a month where I'm doing 500 miles a week or
Okay.
20 hours a week on the bike, like really high volume. You're also doing things off the bike like yoga, strength training, addressing any injuries, that kind of maintenance. So,
Mm,
and I really love riding and I love riding myself into the ground. So that's one of my favorite, used to be one of my favorite times of the year. And I used to live in California.
yeah.
So the winter was like dreamland every day. So that's that first block. And then you look at it going into a season. If you have a really long season like that, you want to race yourself into some of your A races.
Yeah.
And that if you get too fit too early and you don't have the right kind of breaks during the season, it can
Totally.
be really treacherous. So you're looking at the first part of the year where you're using a lot of the races in the first part of the year are usually like 1 day races, and they're less of the multi-day races. And so you're kind of pulsing those in and out of, again, just doing endurance training and then doing some really hard racing. And then you build into the next period, which is probably stage racing for me, where it's almost like you're doing no training outside of the races because they're so hard and they're so long. And you also have to factor in travel, and how much travel can take out of you, especially international travel, keeping yourself healthy, and those types of things. So that period is like racing, 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 and resting. And then at some point, and it usually happens after the national championships, which are generally in the middle of the year, you get to have a nice break. And
Gotcha.
if you don't reset then with cycling, you can really screw yourself.
Yeah.
And yeah, you can
Sure.
really get into a bad pattern.
So it sounds like to peak at the right time, because that's kind of like the thing with a lot of sports and a lot of athletes, right? You want to like peak at the right time. You, like you said, you wanted to kind of build up and be ready for your A races. So it's like build that foundation, build that base where you're doing it a lot of volume and you're building up your aerobic capacity so that you can go. And then it's kind of like as you get into the beginning of the season, the intensity starts to ramp up, but the volume of that intensity is a little bit lower. And then as you kind of progress more and more towards your like the races that you really, really care about, it's like everything is like race intensity, and then everything else is just recovery after that.
Yep, this is exactly what it is.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think nailing that. I used to have a team director that would always say, have the confidence to rest, because that's the hardest interval for an endurance athlete, or having an injury. It's like an unplanned injury that's way harder than going out and doing VO2 intervals. Like mentally, the stress of resting and comparing, like, what are other people doing? When are they resting? Like, it's the worst thing you can do. Like sticking to your plan and knowing that, I mean, on one of the teams, we had a year of like so many people had sicknesses, and it became a running joke that anytime someone got sick, the first race back, they would win, because it kept happening
Yeah.
because they were getting extra rest.
Yeah. That's hilarious. Oh my gosh. That's crazy. So one along the same lines, on the same idea of training and intensity, how do you think about, as you're going throughout the season, how do you think about it in terms of I've been trying to like formulate the question in my mind as I prepare here, is in terms of where your heart rate is for how long during what periods of time. So like you mentioned, the off season, if you will, that kind of the winter season where you're just trying to get a lot of volume. It's all more lower intensity, maybe heart rates, I don't know, zone 2, whatever percentage you want to say that might be, and you're doing a lot of that. Like how do you see the progression in terms of how much time you spend in certain heart rate zones versus how much time you spend in other heart rate zones, and why behind that progression?
So this is really a cool topic, because cycling is a little bit different
Okay.
when it comes to measuring zones. And I have a friend who's a nutritionist and elite runner, and he runs like 100 miles a week.
Wow.
He's recently taken up cycling, and of course, he's amazingly good at it. And we're all like, oh my God, you suck. Like, we could never run like you. But we have a lot of conversations about this, and we've done some intervals together throughout the summer where I've learned that the way that runners structure intervals is a little bit different than cyclists, and runners only really have heart rate to go off of. In cycling, what we have power meters on our bikes. And so that basically, how you look at, and it's not that some cyclists wear heart rate monitors, some pay less attention to it. And heart rate can, again, still be a great tool for like knowing if you know, when you're sick and your menstrual cycle and other things. But generally what you measure is your power. And so it's very similar, where you have your zones: zone 1, easy; zone 2, endurance; up to zone 6, above threshold. and you determine your threshold power based off of a power test that you'll usually do once or twice a year. And then you set everything off of that threshold power.
Tell me about that power test. What does that power test look like?
There's a few different power tests that you can use, and a few different schools of thought on power. So most coaches train off of your 20-minute power, and that sets your threshold. So you would go out and you would do that power test. Normally you would do like a 5-minute warm up with a really hard effort. And then you would do this 20-minute power test. And then that is your threshold power. And you do a percentage of that power for all of your zones going up or down.
And are you doing that 20-minute power test? Or are you trying to go as hard as you can for 20 minutes?
Yeah, without blowing up.
Sounds terrible.
It's the worst. I hate 20-minute power. And it's like anxiety producing to the max. Like every time I've had to do a test, it just doesn't go well, and we'll end up pulling numbers from a race. But I had a coach for a few years that used an 8-minute power test, which is a little bit more geared to my strength. I was a climber, but I was a really good climber between that like 5 to 12 minutes. And so this 8-minute power test worked better for me. And then you adjust for those zones. But I would say that it's very similar to what you were kind of describing as the flow of the season with the time that you spend in zones. But here's the interesting thing that I just learned from my running friend. He said, wow, I'm noticing that when we do really hard intervals together, you take a lot of rest. So let's say I'm doing like one of the hardest workouts that I used to do would be 16 2-minute VO2 intervals with 8 minutes of rest in between each one.
Wow.
He said that when he does VO2 intervals, it's like equal rest. But in cycling, it's different. It's like the shorter the interval, the longer the rest. And then the longer the interval, which would mean it's a little bit lower on, a little lower power, you would have maybe a little less rest.
Yeah. How would you describe why that might be, or just trying to maybe think about it right now? Why would that be different from cycling to running? Is it because cycling is more like actually like leg strength, leg power driven, whereas running might be more just a little bit more cardiovascularly based? Like, how would you describe why that work to rest ratio is a little bit different?
We were having that conversation exactly. And I was like, why is it like this? And one thing I can say with running is it's like you can get your heart rate up higher running generally because you're using your whole body, but then you can also like use your whole body to like cool yourself down.
Yeah.
A lot of the times in cycling, like the rest is while you're descending and you're not moving at all. And so that can be really interesting because it's like almost worse to restart an interval. But yeah, I don't really know what that is, if it's like recovering the musculature or because in a race setting, you're never going to get that. You're going to be like, excuse me, I need 7 more minutes before you attack.
Yeah, totally.
So you have to be strategic and, structure it. Doing group rides, very similar to a race. But
so maybe last, I want to get a little bit more specific on now that you brought up because of some of the intervals. So you mentioned in the off season, you're doing mainly like lower intensity, a lot of volume. But then you just kind of mentioned where sometimes I'm doing 2-minute VO2 effort and then an 8-minute rest. Like at what times during that season are you doing that? Like they're like 2 minutes on, 8-minute rest. Are you doing that kind of during the beginning of the racing season? So you want to be ready to perform, but we're not like quite towards the races that I really care about. Where are you in the season when you start doing a little bit more of that stuff?
the peak, those really hard workouts would be like a sharpening workout, like sharpening the knife workout. Or if you had an A race that you were like fine tuning for. Sometimes it depends also. Cycling is really unique because it's a team sport. So your role on a team varies from what my role varied from like the person on the team that is there to get results and is supported by her teammates to being a team captain that's only providing support. And you can actually lose fitness in races sometimes when you're just sitting around with your teammates supporting you and you only have to go hard once. And so if you're in the role of supporting, you're, riding hard, you're covering attacks, you're maybe riding in breakaways, you're doing lead outs, it's very different. So again, like depending on like who you are and maybe if you get opportunities different times of the season, it's all very complex actually.
Yeah,
Probably why cycling seems unapproachable sometimes for, people who want to try getting into cycling.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, it's fascinating. I'm sure it's fascinating. I'm sure. Now to stick on the endurance race side of things, but away from the physical, but more towards the mental. What are some of the mindsets or the mental tactics or the self-talk when you're doing the amount of mileage that you're talking about? Like no matter what you're doing, when you're doing the same thing for a long period of time, it's mentally taxing. And that's probably, everybody would say it's a certain percentage of the battle. I don't know if it's 80% mental, 20% physical, or it's both, obviously. But what are some of the mental strategies that you feel like have helped you last and not want to quit and not lay off the gas pedal and things of that nature?
Yeah, great question. Because I think from the outside looking in, the life of an elite athlete sometimes seems very glamorous. Like you just get to exercise and eat all day, right?
Yeah.
But there are, we have feelings and emotions and things that are going on in life that, drive energy levels. And it's definitely, like I was saying earlier, I love to ride. So for me, getting out the door and doing the long miles has never been, that's never been really challenging for me. What can be challenging is when you're traveling to a different country and you're away from home for a long period of time and the weather's crappy and it's windy and it's raining and you're nervous and you don't want to get hurt. And that's actually a lot of people that I know now just have a support system, whether it's within, family or a sports psychologist. So I would say that was something that was very helpful to me, is to have someone that you're just kind of breaking down those times that make you feel like a little lower or it's a lot of anxiety that you feel like it's taking away from having it be really happy. And then I dealt with some kind of weird injuries and health problems and some serious crashes in my career. And I think that's when, to really answer your question, that's where things can get very messy, where the mental part of it, like I was saying, is harder than the physical part of it. It's harder than doing the work.
Well, I'm gonna go there with you. I'm gonna make you dive into some of these overcoming some of those fears there with maybe some of the crashes, because this is gonna be relatable for everybody. There's gonna be times where people failed at doing something or had a major obstacle or did something and it didn't work out very well, but they need to do it again, or they have to do it again, or maybe they should do it again, but the flashbacks of the failure or the bad experience continue to come up. And if it continues to come up, then you're more likely to probably make it happen again. So what are the things that you did to kind of process it, to get over that fear so that you could ultimately be more successful on the other side of it when you attempted a similar or the same thing?
Yeah, for me, it was shifting my mindset with what my goals were. So I didn't get into cycling until I was in grad school. So it was later in life and it was totally unexpected. I found out that I had this massive engine and everything that I did was just like I was a meteor. It was so easy. I put my mind to it. I won every local race. I, went up through the categories. I had offers from all of these teams. I was going to be racing with Team USA in Europe. Like everything was just like, go, 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 go. And then I had these health issues that I have with my arteries. So essentially, I've had both the arteries in my legs repaired for blood flow issues. And that was so unexpected. And even though I was in my 20s, so relatively mature to like a much younger rider, I wasn't a mature athlete.
Mm.
And I was very sad and depressed. And I kind of had the attitude of just comparing myself to what everyone else was doing, and not knowing the factors that might be happening in their life, like maybe a loss of a loved one, or they're working a job also to support their career, and just totally focusing on like what I thought was everyone else was doing all the fun stuff, and I was stuck being injured and having surgeries and navigating the financial piece of that. And I really let it get to me, because at the time my mindset was, I want to be the best and I want to win and I want every opportunity. I also want to do right by all the people that have helped me get to this point in my career, a lot of support. And I felt like I was failing. Eventually, through another very horrible and scary crash in a race, where essentially like 60 riders slid out and crashed on top of me. And I was basically crushed into a wall on a bridge, and could have been a career-ending crash. That was a turning point for me, because up until that point, I had focused on coming back, being the best, the best, the best. And I never thought about it in a different way. I never thought about, how could I be a different type of teammate or a different type of asset to a team, or, even showing up for myself differently. And that crash kind of switched everything for me, because it was so serious. And I was so glad that I just walked away from it with a bunch of broken bones and surgeries. And I wasn't paralyzed. I didn't die. And that allowed me to think from a different mindset. Coming back from that crash, everything was so hard all the time that I had to learn, being in the peloton, which is the group of riders in a race. I had to learn different things. Like I couldn't just do whatever I want and be at the front all the time. And what that ended up allowing me to do was becoming a team captain later in my career. So I realized that I had other assets other than just being fast. I was a really good descender. My teammates felt really safe around me. I could read races. I was gaining experience, understanding riders and tactics. We had younger teammates, and I would teach them things like how to go back and feed from the caravan, which is the cars that follow you behind the race. So I started to realize like, oh, I'm really good at all of these other things. And then the pressure just started to lower. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to rise to the occasion that is presented to me. And my dreams of like riding for Team USA at the Olympics are never going to happen. And I just am going to stop focusing on that.
Yeah. Do you think you would have been named team captain if you didn't have this crash?
Maybe I would have raced for a longer time, and I would have been a team captain to a development team later. Like maybe the timeline would have changed, but no, I don't think so.
You don't think you would have developed some of these other skill sets that made you probably a better like actual team captain, rather than just because you'd been doing it for long and had maybe some good results?
I think it would have taken a long time, just from like purely racing, and then like aging and kind of maybe, just declining a little bit. Just like sometimes you just also, what I've learned and what I used to think when I was younger, and I would see older riders move into these roles or want to retire, and I could not fathom that. I was like, I don't understand how you can't just want to be the best and to win everything. And now I'm there, and I'm like, oh, it's so liberating to both things are great, but
I think it's so important that you had the blinders on. You had such a narrow focus on this one particular goal, and then this crash or these experiences kind of like opened up your eyes to more perspective and more a wider array or a wider gaze, if you will, of like all other goals that you could actually have during this? And that's something that I kind of even talk a little bit about in a little bit of a different language, if you will, in the fitness and clients that I coach, where it's like, you know, some people come in so focused on like weight loss, weight loss, weight loss, weight loss, where it's like, no, you can actually also get better at push-ups, and you can also get faster, and you can also make new friends in this workout class, and you can also show yourself that you're willing to like meal prep on a regular basis. So like there's so much, you should have more breadth to what your goals and your definition of success and your definition of progress should be outside of this just one narrow thing.
Yeah. And then before you know it, you've lost weight.
Exactly. That's the whole idea. It's like when you focus on something that's too narrow, then it's going to be sometimes more difficult for it to come. But if you actually just focus on some of these other things, the result that you ultimately want will end up taking care of itself.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a strong message.
Yeah.
Hard to follow through when you're living it. And it does take experience, but it is like, it sounds like you're a support system to a lot of people. Back to that support system. It's a good message to give.
Well, even like now, if you're on a long ride, let's say you're, I don't know, going on a 50-mile ride and 35 miles in, it's really tough. Like, what do you think about in order to be like, get yourself mentally through the last 15 miles? I mean, like, you know, oftentimes like that third quarter of whatever it is we might be doing is the mentally most taxing because we've been working for a while, but like we can't quite see the finish line yet. So like, what do you kind of do in maybe some of those instances mentally?
I'm really big on thinking how I feel afterwards. One, I'll eat because I'm like, okay, I probably need to eat more.
Yeah.
And I always think, yeah, what am I going to feel like afterwards? Like it always feels good to do it, even if it's bad during the moment. And I use that tactic during races too, when I'm really nervous or something goes wrong. I'm just like, there's no worse feeling than quitting. But eventually it's going to be tonight, and I'm going to be in the shower just like I was last night and like I will be tomorrow night. And I'm going to be so glad that I followed through.
Totally. I'm going to botch the exact quote, but like the pain of discomfort is much greater than or much less than the pain of regret or something like that. So important to put yourself in the future version of yourself shoes and think about how that person is going to think about the situation afterwards that gets you to just keep going. Totally. 100%. I want to get into the a little bit of electrolyte replacement, especially because I think it's getting so more and more popular right now. I think, you know, maybe one of the most popular brands out there is Element right now, in terms of electrolytes that people commonly drink. I thought it was really fascinating when I went to y'all's site, Salt Stick, and I read how they discovered a while back in science that most people's sweat contains a similar ratio of electrolytes across sodium, potassium, calcium, and magnesium. And so what people are excreting is a very similar ratio and percentage of each of those particular electrolytes. But a lot of the sports drinks, and then coconut water was one of the examples on there, don't have the same replenishment of those electrolytes like at the same rate. A lot don't give you maybe the right, or don't give you any magnesium or any calcium. Why does that matter? Like, what is a deficiency in maybe a couple of those electrolytes? And why does that impair you, or how does that impair you?
Yeah. My favorite topic. So just to back up quickly and give some context,
Totally.
I have a master's in exercise physiology, and I was going to pursue a PhD until I got sidetracked with cycling. Yeah. But what I was focused on in grad school at San Diego State, we had an environmental chamber, which is basically a big glass box that you can manipulate in an environment. And we were studying elite cyclists, looking at calcium lost through sweat and how that impacted bone density, which is it's a real topic in the world of cycling, is bone density. So I had all of this, you know, real life experience through the research that I was doing. And I wanted to carry this into grad school or into my PhD. Yep. And then I start cycling. And then I end up becoming the vice president of product development for Salt Stick. And I'll skip past that story. And so here we are, and I'm like, oh, okay, this is I know this because this is what I was studying in grad school. And Salt Stick was founded by Jonathan Toker. He was a chemist. He was also an Ironman triathlete and elite runner. And his whole shtick was there are 4 key minerals or electrolytes that you lose in your sweat. You just said them: sodium, potassium, calcium, and magnesium. But I think a lot of people don't know that calcium and magnesium are electrolytes. Maybe now that electrolytes are, on the rise. But especially don't know that you do lose them in a certain ratio. And so if we're talking specifically about people that are sweating a lot, are athletic, whether that's your daily like exercise class or cycling or running or whatever it is, that's a lot of sweat over time. And so throwing off that ratio is not good. The sodium potassium ratio, that's more obvious. So you have these little sodium potassium pumps that actually that's how muscle contraction happens. So when I'm a very big believer that cramping is related to electrolytes. I know that the research on that is a little bit mixed, but I know from experience that it is. So that sodium potassium ratio is important for both muscle contraction, but also for replenishment, both before, during, and after. The calcium and magnesium are the ones we don't think about as much, but I just mentioned the bone density. Now, if you're a runner and you're constantly pounding the pavement, you're naturally getting that impact. But with cycling or maybe like rowing or other sports that don't have that impact, you would want to be considering that and replacing that electrolyte. So it's really important for bone health. The other thing that we know, and
just to say it again real quickly for people, but not to gloss over it. So the running, because there is impact, that helps to maintain bone density. Whereas if you don't have impact, that's not something that assists in maintaining bone density. So that's why calcium and magnesium intake when you're doing lower impact things is important to maintain bone density.
Yeah, for everything, but especially in those scenarios, because if you're just sweating it out every day, and you're not supplementing with calcium, or you're not getting it naturally in your diet, it's really important. And something that the particulars of the research that I was looking at is, as you become more trained, more acclimated to an environment, your body becomes really efficient and it starts to reabsorb sodium and potassium. So if you were to go to Kona before Ironman Worlds, like everyone's there right now, for 2 to 4 weeks, your body's going to start those physiological adaptations to heat and humidity training. One of those adaptations, it's a small piece of everything, is your sweat ducts will start to reabsorb sodium and potassium while you sweat, up to 50%. So you start to become more efficient. Calcium does not work the same. So from what we were seeing is that it doesn't start to reabsorb quite like sodium and potassium. So yet another reason to onboard calcium, whether that's with your electrolyte product, or another, diet supplementation. But if you're a heavy sweater and you exercise consistently, and I'm assuming most of your audience probably does, it's important. And then with magnesium, very, similar. So you're losing magnesium. It's a very small amount, but magnesium in particular can impact recovery and sleep. And so it's important to also replace magnesium. And we use magnesium citrate in most of our products, which is a very bioavailable form of magnesium. And again, it's a small amount. It's not a dose that would cause any sort of GI distress, but the ratio is fascinating because every one of our products, from our capsules to our fast chews, which are like a sweet tart, they're like a chewable electrolyte. And if you want, I can tell you a little bit about the science of oral absorption. but all of our products have that ratio.
Yeah. Let's go there in a second. In terms of staying on the electrolytes a little bit more to get some clarification. So, like, let's say somebody is not replenishing some of the calcium and magnesium, and therefore maybe not getting some of the bone restoration is that like setting them up for potentially like bone injuries?
I think it depends on what your diet is.
Okay.
Like maybe if you don't eat dairy, and you're not eating enough of the other things that are high in calcium, and if you're not doing maintenance and then other impact activities,
Yeah.
then yes, potentially it could. But I'm not going to say that if you don't have a good big picture that you can't supplement with other things.
Gotcha. And then one of the other things I'm interested by is like personal people's individual differences around really needing electrolyte replacement. So just like very anecdotally, I've started to do it because it tastes good and it gets me to stay more hydrated, just generally speaking. But I don't really have instances in the past where if I didn't have it, I felt too negatively impacted. But I also probably wasn't doing the amount of endurance that would really crush me if I don't have electrolyte replacement. But like, for example, my mom, like when she started doing electrolytes when she was out in a hot summer day and sweating a lot, like it made a huge difference for her. Like what is the reasoning why some people might like really, really need it and benefit from it, whereas someone else might?
So a few things. Where you're born. If you're born in a hot and humid environment, your sweat ducts are basically formed in the first 2 years of your life, and you can be more efficient simply from where you're born, like if you're born at altitude. Um,
So if you're born in a hot, humid environment, then your sweat ducts are better at reabsorbing the electrolytes.
it's more likely that you would be
Okay.
more naturally. There's other factors that go into it, the time you're spending at different places. And then some people are just heavier sweaters, and that can mean one of two things. You can lose a lot of fluids, but not have a high density of electrolytes, or you could be a really dense sweater, and that's that person that you see that's getting very salty.
Mm.
And it's like caking on their running clothes or cycling kit.
Right.
So it depends on, how you react, what type of sweater you are. And then for women, sometimes the hormonal cycle can dictate that also. So
Totally.
there's a variety of factors that are making you the type of sweater you are. And I'm more like you, where I can get away with really kind of torturing myself longer, and my husband can't. Like his cycling kit, like we can stand it up after a 5-hour ride, so crusted with salt.
Yeah.
um so
Wow.
hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, totally. And from still on the sweating topic, I feel like there are some people who just don't sweat. It takes a lot for them to start sweating. What's that about?
Yeah, so that like a very dry sweater where you don't see that, it's just like they don't lose as much fluid.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean sometimes that they're not losing electrolytes. And I would say, so if you're just fascinated with it, or if you're having problems, you can do a sweat test. Gatorade makes patches that are really cheap. They're not the most accurate, but if you wanted to compare like relative to different environments or different times of, your training, whatever, you could continue to use a Gatorade patch. And I think they actually use fruit or vegetable juice to do the assay to determine how much chloride you're losing. So that's like the sodium chloride that you would lose in your sweat. And so it can give you like a general idea. And then there's products like Nix biosensors that actually have like more of it's like an electrode that you put on your arm, and they can do the electrical interaction, and it can tell you your fluid loss, your electrolyte loss. You can put it into your watch, and it can actually like ping you like, hey, you're doing this. It's a good way to just gauge what's happening with your body.
Yeah.
I think the average person loses between 800 to 1,000 milligrams of sodium per hour
Wow.
in like a neutral environment. It's a lot more than people realize
Yeah.
times.
Yeah.
And you may not be the type of person that, you're exercising long enough or like you're less affected by it for whatever reason. But then later in the day, you're like craving sweets or like not sleeping very well and your heart rate's higher at night, or like there's all these factors that actually are impacted by being hydrated.
Wow. Yeah, I don't think most people and me oftentimes realize the impact that electrolytes can have outside of just like a particular workout or event that you're partaking in. That's fascinating. Look, maybe last question. You kind of, I think, referenced it a second earlier. What are like the drawbacks if you have too many of these electrolytes, or are they any? Do you just pee them out? Do you just sweat them out, or what's the drawbacks of having too many of them?
Yeah, well, also a good point. And I think that's the unique thing about the salt stick products is our fast chew tablets, there's 100 milligrams of sodium, 30 milligrams of potassium, 10 calcium, and 6 magnesium in 2 tablets. So you can really target towards your activity. You can microdose versus
Mm.
like 1,000 milligrams of sodium in a packet. I think one thing to be aware of is that sodium is sodium. Yes, there's different types. There's sodium chloride, there's sodium citrate, there's all these fancy salts that people are putting into electrolyte packets, but you can get sodium through your food.
Yeah.
And so if you are just generally trying to be more healthy and to do more activity and to eat better, and maybe you have high blood pressure or whatever that is, you want to account for that. Be aware that electrolyte packets are not some magical thing that are going to change your life. Like they're there to supplement and support a healthy, active lifestyle. So
Yeah.
it's one thing to be aware of, or like genetically in my family, people have high blood pressure, even though they're very healthy and active. So we know that. If you overdo it, oftentimes like that can be very stressful to your kidneys. Like it has to process that. So if you're just constantly drinking stick packs with too much in it and you're not actually sweating and being
Yeah.
active, your body has to do something with those electrolytes.
Mm.
Um, and then if you get the balance off during an event, normally it's a it's probably coming from the amount of sugar you're also taking with those electrolytes.
Mm.
Where you've overdone it, you can always drink water to help reverse that.
Gotcha.
But sometimes when you're feeling crappy or you're not carrying water because you're running or whatever, it can be hard to do that.
Totally. Totally. Well, actually, now the last question, but because I wanted to go back on it, you touched on earlier. You were saying if you want me to go into the benefits of the chewable, or I forget the type, but what? Go for it.
So we make this really unique product, and you chew them like sweet tarts, and they absorb through the lining of your mouth. So there's been a lot of research done on drugs and vitamins. Like one that comes to mind that people have maybe taken is melatonin, where you chew it and it like is very fast acting. So oral absorption is unique because it will go directly into your bloodstream, meaning it doesn't have to be easily absorbed through your gut. You don't have to take the 20 minutes. So we did some research with students at Western Colorado University where we showed that the fast chews, the electrolytes start absorbing within 45 seconds.
Wow.
It's really quick. And it's true. This is not a gimmicky product. This product is, if you ever came to an expo with us, you would have the pleasure of so many people coming up and saying like how they learned about fast chews and how it's changed them, or how they were cramping and a friend gave it to them and they were like literally in a minute, I wasn't cramping anymore. So it's a really unique product and they're tasty. So they're fun to eat.
You said they're called fast chews.
Yeah, I'll send you a care package so you can try them. You can give some to your mom too.
That'd be great. Yeah, that would be awesome. That would be awesome. This has been great. This has been great. I know you do a ride out there in Montana. I think on an annual basis. It's called the Last Best Ride. Is that right? Tell us about that real quick.
Yeah, so quickly, long story short, is growing up here in Montana, pretty humble beginnings for me, not a lot of financial resources. And so I didn't find sport when I was younger. But I did really love school and I knew I wanted to go to college. And I had a guidance counselor that helped me apply for a bunch of local scholarships. And those funded almost all of my undergrad, and I had no student loans.
Wow.
And that had a huge impact on my life. And obviously, at the time, I didn't know that I was going to become a professional cyclist and have an opportunity to maybe pass that on. So, when my husband and I moved back to Whitefish in 2020 during COVID, we wanted to start a gravel cycling event. Gravel is a massively growing discipline in cycling. It's extremely welcoming. It's really fun and down to earth. And we have amazing riding up here by Glacier National Park, where I live. So we started this event as a nonprofit with the goal being to have a scholarship program involved with it. And this was my way of finally giving back to the community that gave so much to me. And we just finished year 5. We've given out $130,000 of scholarships to 31 students from 5 different schools. So it's been massively successful. And the really cool thing, the last thing I'll say about it is, what the heck does this have to do with cycling, right? Like, these girls aren't learning to ride bikes, but I think there's just this really cool thing that happens. And especially now, like wanting to give young people the opportunity to go out and to learn to be empathetic, and to give back to this world. Like, people unite on that idea, and they've been so supportive of the scholarship. Like, we have people who come from all over the country, different countries, and they support this scholarship program while they're here doing the event. So
That's
yeah.
awesome. That's so cool. I watched a little bit of your, it was a while back now, maybe back in April or something. I was watching a little bit of your video talking about the people who like applied for the scholarship or whatnot. It was pretty cool to watch, but it sounds super cool. And are you 2026? Are you doing it May or June, or what month do you usually do it in?
July 26th. If you want to try a gravel race.
Oh boy. We'll see. July 26th, 2026, in Whitefish, Montana. That sounds super cool. Well, this has been awesome. The website for y'all's company, Alete Nutrition, is that how you pronounce it?
Just go to saltstick.com. Okay. It confuses everyone. It's Elite Active Nutrition, and we named it that because it means all athletes, not elite athletes, ALETE. So, but saltstick.com or elitenutrition.com is a good way to find us.
That's awesome. You can also follow Jess on Instagram at Jess Cerra, and you can follow at Saltstick. You can also follow at The Last Best Ride, the race that we just talked about as well. This has been great. We covered a lot of different topics, and all of you guys who are endurance athletes in some way, shape, or form, or just wanting to improve your performance in the gym or anything like that, you're going to take something away from here. And I know a lot of people have been starting to supplement with electrolyte packets as well. And so hopefully you learned a thing or two about how to best implement them and maybe what kinds you should best look for. So go to saltstick.com, follow her on Instagram at Jess Cerra. If you're listening on the Apple Podcast app or Spotify, make sure you hit the follow button. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit like and subscribe. But Jess, appreciate your time. That's all we got for today.
Thanks. It's been fun.